Note, from Han Ji-yu. This chronicle is written in 2020 and is the cornerstone of the Chaos Galaxy series. We now translate it into English so that more people can deeply understand the lore of Chaos Galaxy. Part 1. Timeline of the Empire. In 1961, the first manned spacecraft was launched. Humans left their Mother Earth for the first time. In 1969, the first man landed on the moon. In the 22nd century, humans began colonizing the moon. In the 23rd century, hibernating voyages were introduced, and humans began colonizing Mars. In the 26th century, sub-light-speed navigation was utilized. Human colonists took control of the inner solar system planets, and the Solar Union was established. In the 3rd century of the Solar Union era, there was an AI rebellion, and all of society except a few frontier regions came under artificial intelligence domination. After nearly 100 years of artificial intelligence tyranny, a group of hackers saved humanity and rebuilt the Solar Union. Since then, artificial intelligence has been considered taboo, banned by federal legislation, and punishable by death for private research. In the 5th century of the Solar Union, the technology of warp jumping was achieved, and humanity finally got rid of the trauma left by the tyranny of artificial intelligence, and began to break out of the solar system to begin large-scale colonization. In the 8th century of the Solar Union era, the average human lifespan had reached over 200 years, thanks to a combination of eugenics, genetic modification, and the widespread use of biomechanical augmentation. In the 11th century of the Solar Union era, the Solar Union spread across half of the galaxy, and it took more than 50 years, even by using warp jumps, to travel from Earth to the most distant colonies, and the expansion of the Solar Union had reached its limit. In the 12th century of the Solar Union era, the Great Civil War broke out because of colonial discontent with corrupt rule, and the foolish, high-handed approach taken by the Solar Union. In the 13th century of the Solar Union era, the Great Civil War culminated in the destruction of the Earth and the abandonment of our home solar system. But after the Solar Union was completely wiped out, the battle for human supremacy continued for nearly 200 years, wiping out hundreds of planetary worlds and reducing thousands of them to isolated wastelands. In the 15th century of the Solar Union era, the Phoenix Dynasty, whose power was centered in the galactic core, conquered the remaining 3,000 human worlds after a long war and proclaimed a galactic empire. Part 2. The Empire's Rule. The Galactic Empire, which includes the so-called 3,000 worlds, is divided into 13 sectors. The core of the galaxy where the dynasty originated is called the Shendu sector, which is directly under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Court. The rest of the galaxy belongs to 12 other sectors. However, to prevent separatist forces from becoming too powerful, the government was not set up as an administrative body that could rule the entire sector. Within a sector, the world is governed in various ways. There are resource worlds and industrial worlds, where the Empire has a dispatched governor, fleet worlds governed by fleet admirals, and fortress worlds set up at key interplanetary jump points, semi-autonomous trade league worlds, and fully autonomous vassals that recognize the authority of the Emperor but do not pay taxes. In the early days of the Empire, there was a war of succession that lasted for more than a decade. After the second Emperor united the Empire, he legislated that all princes should not hold military power, and set up a system of examinations for civil officials in the Empire, so that all people, regardless of their birth and wealth, could pass the examinations to become a member of the civil officials in the Empire, and be promoted gradually through the annual performance assessment of the Ministry of Officials, and the best of them could be promoted to such high departments as the Prime Minister of the Empire, and the Minister of the Six Departments. Since the Empire controlled only about a third of the world, a garrison fleet was deployed in all the sectors outside the planet Shendu, which were directly subordinated to the court. Garrison fleets can vary in size, but usually contain hundreds of ships and hundreds of thousands of fighting forces, enough to intimidate any vassal state attempting to become independent, or assure the rule over the world's governors. During the long period of peaceful rule, the court's focus gradually shifted from external conquest to maintaining internal stability. One of the 6 departments, the Justice Department, takes on this responsibility, with the envoys called Orange Riders, traveling across the galaxy looking for signs of rebellion and corruption, most of the time without the help of the garrison fleet. The Orange Riders and the Justice Department's Space Special Operations Forces are enough to nip any problems like this in the bud. Part 3. Threats to the Empire. In the 1,000 years since the Galactic Empire was founded, there have been several minor insurrections, but only 2 major threats to the nation's foundation. The first crisis happened when the first emperor died. 8 princes in charge of the army respectively fought for succession. It started a great war in the whole territory of the empire. In the end, it took more than a decade for the 4th prince to end the succession war and become the second Orthodox emperor, through alliances, wars, intrigue, and deception. This great civil war brought the new empire to a near total collapse. To avoid this situation happening again, the Second Emperor legislated to prohibit the princes from holding military power, and to completely separate the civil and military officials of each sector, each reporting independently to a different department, and to massively remove the positions of the numbers of nobles who had made contributions to the founding of the empire, and to select civilians from each planetary world who had no background to serve as officials through civil examinations. Although the unification of the galaxy was achieved by the First Emperor, the foundation of the empire, which passed for 1,000 years, was actually created by the Second Emperor after the crisis of the Succession War. The second crisis was triggered during the reign of the Seventh Emperor by a religious force that believed in technology. This group of technology cultists, calling themselves the Mo-Tzu Order, rose from the wasteland of the Old Earth, and they ignored the taboos and applied artificial intelligence and mechanical power on a large scale. They claimed that there should be no fighting between human beings, and that all dangerous work should be handed over to artificial intelligence and machines. At first, they did not aim their ambitions directly at the Empire, but they gradually spread their mission into the frontier realms. But the rulers of a vassal state, the dynasty of Thenis, decided to harness the power of AI in their quest for independence. He used the priests of the Mo-Tzu Order, popularized the Order's faith in the country, and formed an army of intelligent robots that were controlled by an artificial intelligence. With these, he invaded the surrounding imperial territory. The imperial court finally decided to send an army to ravage Thenis, after a garrison fleet that had been dispatched to suppress the rebellion was destroyed by the Thenis mechanical legions. But with the support of the Mo-Tzu Order, they were able to compete even with the main forces of the empire. Finally, the Imperial Prime Minister figured out a way, and shortly after an Imperial agent arrived at the Mo-Tzu headquarters, the mechanical army of the Thenis dynasty suddenly lost all control. The Imperial army successfully put down the AI rebellion and beheaded all the royal family of the dynasty of Thenis. At the end of the war, the Empire recovered those worlds which were invaded by Thenis, but granted the old territories of the Thenis dynasty to the Mo-Tzu Order. In contrast, the Mo-Tzu Order promised not to send missionaries to other parts of the Empire, and to provide the Empire with shackled AI commanders and to develop mechanical armies. The Phoenix Empire had sailed through its first millennium. However, no one expected that a real crisis was coming, and this was not only a crisis to the Empire, but a threat to the existence of the entire human species. Part 4. Rise of the Aliens. In the year 1012, an Orange Rider traveled to the world Guzheng in the North Sea sector to investigate why a planet had lost contact with the rest of the Empire. He sent back a bizarre report to the Justice Department, which spoke of the planet Guzheng having no signs of any life existent, and all creatures, all buildings, all vegetation had disappeared. Even the sea had dried up. Then came a second report, sent from a starship on the return of the Orange Rider, and numerous typos and omissions revealed the urgency of the dispatch. The report mentioned that their ship had been attacked by terrifying cosmic creatures who seemed to possess intelligence. Since then, that Orange Rider and his ship had gone missing. The Justice Department had to take this seriously, and dispatched special forces known as the White Wolves, which had many outstanding achievements, to go to the North Sea sector to investigate. It took the extinction of several planetary worlds and the destruction of the White Wolf forces before the Empire finally learned the true situation. It turns out that from the second world of the Guzheng system, which was located at the edge of the galaxy, countless cosmic monsters were invading the galaxy. They gather in vast hive fleets visible in the stars, devouring everything on any living planet in their path. The North Sea sector couldn't even fight a small detachment sent by this hive fleet. Part 5. The Ultimate Weapon. The massive cosmic cataclysm that would come to be known as the First Alien Impact took place. After the aliens ravaged the North Sea sector, the alien army quickly broke into small groups and invaded the surrounding sectors. The largest group, which is believed to be led by a being known as Pale Dragon, the sire of the Hive Fleet, headed for Turgis, an abandoned planet at the border between the North Sea sector and the North Sky sector. The Imperial Court was confused by this move, but they were shocked when the War Minister found an important piece of information from the early archives and told all of the ministers. Turgis was originally an important military base for the old Solar Union, where it was said that the Union Army kept an ultimate weapon buried there, a weapon that was designed to annihilate the colonial allies. Maybe that weapon could be the key against the aliens, but this is what got the Pale Dragon's attention. The court immediately ordered that the North Sky Fleet seize Turgis and find the old Solar Union ultimate weapon. At the same time, in the Shendu system, the various fleets were assembled to prepare the largest Imperial fleet in 1,000 years. The North Sky Fleet had been in the hands of the Li family for nearly 200 years, and was considered one of the top 3 Imperial fleets. In the wasteland planet Turgis, the land forces of the North Sky Fleet and tens of millions of alien monsters began to fight to the death to search for the legendary weapon. It is said that during the battle, a mysterious mech pilot named Thunder, using his custom machine named Alpha Wolf, appeared many times on the battlefield to handle hordes of otherworldly monsters alone. Finally, After taking 40% casualties and the death of Admiral Li Rudong, the North Sky Fleet launched the ultimate weapon. An antimatter ball was shot into the alien hive fleet in orbit, and then appeared a series of antimatter vortexes. A third of the alien monsters were decomposed into atomic dust. Even its prince, the Pale Dragon, was greatly injured. But after this launch, the Union ultimate weapon exploded, and was no longer usable. The North Sky Fleet and the Pale Dragon Hive Fleet both suffered heavy losses, and all retreated far from the accursed planet of Turgis. Part 6. The War of Armageddon. The stricken Pale Dragon waited in place to recover, and spawned more alien monsters. This gave the Imperial Court time to consolidate their forces. Finally, under the command of the 24th Emperor, a huge armada of 10,000 warships and tens of thousands of mechas began to travel towards the Pale Dragon nest. During the battle, the Imperial army saw a charge in the enemy, and a group of super powerful creatures evolved from the ranks of the aliens. These monsters fought beyond any normal expectations, each with a unique ability to take on hundreds of warships at once. The battle, which had been considered an easy victory, was now bogged down in an unmanageable stalemate. A few apostles managed to break through multiple defense lines and destroyed the Emperor's ship. The morale of the Imperial Armada was about to collapse on all fronts, but it was at this point that Captain Hong Yang's calm saved the day. Hong Yang fired her ship cannons, which destroyed a fleeing Imperial warship. Then she announced to the entire battle fleet, "The Emperor is still alive, the victory is ours! I'll be the first to shoot anyone who tries to escape." This lie allowed the Empire's still numerically superior battle fleet to regroup under the thought that their monarch was not slain in battle. But when the aliens' front also fell into disarray, suddenly, like a miracle, countless interlocked antimatter vortexes appeared in the location of the Pale Dragon. The alien prince disappeared into a howling vortex of pain that echoed throughout the entire universe. A few people say that they saw a white mecha, carrying a large device, charge into the aliens during the chaos, but still few know that it was Thunder, the captain of the mysterious White Wolf Squadron. After the war, this mysterious pilot disappeared from sight. At the end, the Galactic Empire was victorious. The humans had won. While there were still small bands of aliens scattered throughout the galaxy, since the hive that made them was gone, it was only a matter of time which they were exterminated. But the people who celebrated did not know that this costly victory was not the end of the war, but a prelude to countless other disasters. The future of the galaxy remains in chaos. Part 7. The Coup within the Empire. After wiping out the Pale Dragon fleet, the first alien impact was over, but the Galactic Empire had paid a terrible price. Dozens of worlds had been wiped out, hundreds of worlds harassed by small groups of aliens, thousands of ancient battleships reduced to ashes, and even the Emperor himself died in the action. As the Emperor's Grand Fleet's remnants left the galaxy to seek revenge against the aliens, power struggles within the court quickly began to shake the Empire from the very top down. The 24th Emperor had no son, only a 7-year-old daughter named Jing. The Prime Minister originally wanted to establish the Empress to the throne, but was soon impeached by 6 ministers. They announced that the Prime Minister urged the Emperor to go to war, resulting in his death and the destruction of the Imperial Army. They arrested and imprisoned him on the accusation of betrayal. The Justice Minister, Duke Gao Shan, was appointed as the new Prime Minister, who, together with 6 ministers, formed a regency court to temporarily rule the empire until the Crown Princess Jing grew into adulthood. Within 3 months after the establishment of the Regency Court, Duke Gao Shan had all of the ministers who were once his allies sentenced to death or put in prison for their crimes, and then appointed 6 new ministers to take charge of the 6 departments. These big changes in the Imperial Court also led to a complicated interpersonal network of governors, fleet commanders, vassals, all thrown into chaos. Countless dispatches of discontent and unrest were sent to Duke Gao Shan, the new prime minister, from the hand of an Orange Rider. Duke Gao Shan and his lackeys devised a secret plan that would leave the rest of the empire in awe of him and leave no one dare to resist his rule. Part 8. The Toho Incidents. The Toho Shogunate, located in the East Repressed Sector, is a vassal state consisting of a shogun and various daimyos. With 9 planetary worlds, it is one of the major powers in the southeastern part of the Galactic Empire. During the 300-year civil war of the Old Union, the Toho Shogunate used its powerful fleet to suppress the hundreds of worlds in the East Repressed Sector, taking the people of the other countries as its slaves. Finally, the Shogunate yielded, and surrendered under the unrelenting iron-blooded strike of the first emperor of the Phoenix Dynasty. Although 1,000 years of history had passed, the other planetary worlds in the East Repressed Sector hated this brutal nation because of its painful memories from the past. An Orange Rider reported that the Shogunate was unstable and intended to break away from imperial control. The court formally sent out an emissary to the Shogunate to meet with the shogun with an imperial edict. However, no sooner had he arrived in the Tosho domain that he was assassinated by ninjas, and the Imperial Edict was destroyed. In the Empire's 1,000-year history, there had never been such a hostile act from a vassal state before. Although a succession of messengers were sent from the shogunate begging for mercy, declaring that they had known nothing about the assassination of the imperial emissary. But in these turbulent times, the majesty of the empire must be maintained with an iron fist. The Regency Court's response was to reduce the Tosho shogunate from a vassal to a direct imperial territory. If the shogun accepts this at once, the court will grant him a sum of money and allow him to move to Shendu as a hostage. Otherwise, he must be beheaded immediately. Those who departed with this new edict were no longer mere emissaries, but the two great armies of the two fleet sectors, the East Repressed Fleet and the North Sky Fleet. Part 9. Geeko Kujo. At this time, the Tosho shogunate had been infiltrated by the spies of the Imperial Justice Department, and the shogun's high officials were either threatened or bribed to persuade the shogun to accept the imperial edict to save their own lives and those of their vassals. The shogun's fleet, which was sent out in a panic to meet the two imperial crusading fleets, had been promised by the shogun's admirals by the spies that they would not seriously resist. According to Duke Gaoshan's careful plan, the name of the Tosho shogunate should be erased from the galaxy after a bloodless parade. However, something unexpected happened. Under the system of the Tosho shogunate, 80,000 noble families provided mech samurai and even warships for the shogunate army. These families were called the Hatamoto. The majority of the planetary worlds that belonged to the shogunate were really the territory of the Hatamoto. These Hatamoto had a strong sense of independence, and to them, the shogun is only the first among them as equals, their chosen leader. When one of the Hatamoto uncovered evidence of the shogun's secret collaboration with the empire, the 80,000 Hatamotos were all enraged, and they spontaneously rose and carried out a Geeko Kujo. All of the shogun's ministers were forced to commit a self-disembowelment ritual called Harakiri, and the Hatamotos seized the command of the fleet from the admirals. One of the most active figures of the rebels was Boten Maru, daimyo of the Sendai family, who proposed an idea at the Council of War and successfully implemented it. In the Battle of the planet Tsushima, the Imperial Crusading fleet made a few volleys as promised, and the Shogun fleet scattered in all directions. Just as the Imperial fleet was easily beginning to pursue, it fell into a trap of the Hatamoto. Ambushed by a large number of mech samurai in the Tsushima asteroid belt, in close combat, the proud and huge cannons and energy lances of the Empire's warships were useless. Before the Empire's space infantry could get out of their hangars, their cargo ships were struck, exploding with all the infantry inside. The Tsushima ambushing battle ended with a disastrous retreat of the two Imperial sector-class fleets. The rebel Hatamoto cheered, and seized the military and political power of the shogunate. Although they did not overthrow the shogun, the Hatamoto and allied forces had become actual ruling body of the Tosho shogunate. Part 10. Extermination Order. Duke Gaoshan's plan had failed. Now, the Empire had begun to face a real crisis. The Empire's dominion of the galaxy is essentially based on a strong military deterrent, but now that half of the Empire's military power had been destroyed by the alien impact, and it had failed miserably in a war to crush a vassal state, the Empire's prestige was in tatters, and many factions were beginning to act on their own accord. Large quantities of supplies and war machines were being shipped to the Tosho shogunate through various channels to secretly support the shogunate's continued fight against the Empire. If this state continued, the rebel forces would surely become unmanageable. At that time, the War Minister, Lord Wenchang, presented a shocking proposal at court, that the Imperial fleet should no longer seize victory by way of conventional space warfare, but they should carry out an atomic extermination of all planetary worlds of the Tosho shogunate. Duke Gaoshan granted Lord Wenchang full authority to end the Tosho rebellion by all means necessary. Lord Wenchang mobilized the three fleets of the East Ocean, South Evan, and South Conquer fleet, and equipped them with a large number of extermination bombs. The plan he gave was not to fight the Hatamoto allied forces massed in the Tsushima system, but to blockade them with some of the Imperial forces and send many small fleets with only a dozen ships to all planetary worlds of the Tosho shogunate, and to bombard the planets with extermination devices. Although the South Evan admiral was assassinated by a shogunate ninja and was thrown into disarray for some while, Lord Wenchang's terrible plan was carried out successfully. No one would have thought that the huge empire with the entire galaxy at its hands would execute such terroristic acts by any means. While the various planetary worlds of the Tosho shogunate discovered the appearance of the Imperial fleet over the orbit and were still debating whether to surrender or summon reinforcements, countless planetary weapons of destruction had already been dropped from orbit, and no city was spared. With hovering clouds of rising fire and smoke covering the entire continent, the few who were not burned by the bombs died in agony from radiation in the days that followed. Neither the shogun nor the Hatamoto, the nobles nor the commoners, were immune from a radioactive death. Thus, more than 1 billion people were wiped out in an instant, and the 9 planetary worlds of the Tosho Shogunate were reduced to uninhabitable wastelands. The name Tosho had no longer any meaningful existence after losing all its land and subjects. 11. Rise of the Tosho Pirates. Lord Wenchang deliberately ordered that holographic images of the destruction of the Tosho Shogunate be sent to the Hatamoto forces, massed in the Tsushima system. The horrific spectacle threw countless Hatamoto families into a frenzy, and caused them to commit suicide. Their families, subjects, lords, and kingdoms all ceased to exist, and their identities and futures were wiped out along with the nuclear explosion. The Hatamoto allied forces, with nearly 1,000 warships, collapsed completely almost within a day, with some ships surrendering, and others kamikaze charging towards Imperial forces, rather than being easily destroyed in anchor. However, there were several figures with strong rallying power, each breaking out with a group of followers. These remnants of the shogunate did not attract the Empire's attention at first, but in the years that followed, they roamed throughout the Empire, attacking tribute ships and plundering planetary outworlds. These men had abandoned the name of the shogunate, and henceforth simply called themselves pirates. The actions of the pirates brought turmoil to many planetary worlds that hadn't experienced war for centuries. From this point onward, there was no longer a safe place in the entire territory of the Galactic Empire. Part 12. End Times. A year after the end of the Tosho War, in 1020 of the Imperial calendar, the Galactic Empire was on the verge of collapse. There are many mercenary worlds scattered throughout the Farsi sector that provided the Empire with elite space infantry. After being called to join the Emperor's grand fleet against the first alien impact, these mercenaries witnessed the embarrassment of the Imperial army in the Battle of Armageddon, and had since lost their reverence for the Empire. After returning home, they united under a charismatic mercenary captain named Alcibiades, and began to raid the Empire's western frontiers. In the western part of the Empire, known as the Great Sand Sea, there are still many abandoned worlds from the Great Civil War of the Old Union, and on these abandoned worlds lived the free people who had never been under the jurisdiction of the Empire. However, on the arrival of the alien impact, a mysterious organization emerged in the wasteland. A prophet, calling himself the Black Caliph, gradually united all of the people of the dunes under his faith of the Great Cosmos, and began to launch a massive march on the Imperial homeworld, known as the Black Caliph Jihad. In the Southeven sector, a character named Zheng Yiguan was elected as president of the South Sea Guild, which was formed by many trading worlds. Zheng was both a merchant and a rogue. After absorbing many pirate forces, the South Sea Guild began to refuse to obey the requirements of the Empire. In the North Sky sector, a band of pirates, calling themselves the Emishi Pirates, led by Bonten Maru, under repeated chases by the North Sky fleet, managed to get away every time, constantly causing plunder and destruction. At the edge of the galaxy, the mysterious Motsu Order suddenly lost all contact with the outside world. In the midst of this fog, it was as if there was some kind of great crisis brewing. At this very moment, a new alien apocalypse is about to hit the troubled galaxy again, and this time, there will no longer be an intact and united empire, and a large fleet led by the Emperor concentrating all power of the galaxy to face them. The future of the galaxy has fallen into endless chaos. End of the Chaos Galaxy Chronicle. Thank you for listening. Special thank you to Han Ji Yu for creating this great series.